I wouldn't see anybody today, so it's wonderful. And I also want to acknowledge all of those people who make an effort to come in the evening to make sure we have beautiful minyanim. The last 2 nights in particular, we've had 20 people at night for minyan is beautiful. So please don't forget Wednesday night. Wednesday night will be Shmini Atzeret. I mean, you come every night of the week. We have 6 o'clock, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And we're here at Shaare Zedek this week. We're not at Shaare Zion. But particularly on Wednesday night, it'll be the last night of going in the Sukkah for this year. So make sure you join us at 6 o'clock for Minacha and Mariv. So, talking about Yom Kippur, some of you will remember that there was this whole sort of list during the services of Kol Nidre in particular of the Al-Chaitz. You remember the Al-Chaitz? Well, we hopped and we clapped on the heart there. And what did we do? We listed all the sins that we have possibly committed during the year. Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, you remember we had him here as a speaker some years ago. He noted that perhaps, just like when you stand before a judge and you're pleading your case, what do you tell the judge? You don't tell the judge all the things you did wrong. You tell the judge all the things you did right, okay? All the good things, hoping that it will sway the opinion. So Rabbi Telushkin says that perhaps along with the list of all the sins we did, perhaps there should also be a list of all the mitzvot that we did during the course of the past year. Makes a lot of sense. I never thought of that. So the question is why? Well, just like we list our sins to remind us not to do them again, according to Telushkin, perhaps we should list our mitzvot to remind us of the opposite, to in fact do them again and again and again. But that got me thinking, what exactly is a mitzvah, and why do we do them in the first place? And when we do a mitzvah, who really do they benefit? So let's see if we can sort of spend a few minutes answering these questions. You don't have to worry. I won't go too long as they're getting the sukkah ready for Kiddush. They need a few extra minutes. I'm going to take those minutes now. So we're going to try and answer these questions. First, what is a mitzvah? Well, technically, a mitzvah does not mean a good deed, even though that's how we use it. Mitzvah means commandment. Some even go as far as to say that a mitzvah means the covenant, the communal covenant that God made with Moshe and Bnei Israel and the children of Israel at Har Sinai. We are commanded by God to perform these acts of 613 mitzvot, which are divided into 2 categories, Bein Adam Lamakom, between man and God, and Bein Adam Lachaveiro, between man and his fellow man. Another topic which it's for another day, that. So having answered this first question, let's turn our attention to the other parts. Why do we do mitzvot, and who do they benefit? There are indeed many answers to these questions. For example, in Chabad theology, mitzvahs are done for one reason only: they're going to help bring the Mashiach. Wow, amazing. So the more mitzvot that we perform, that we do, the greater the likelihood the Mashiach's going to come. And one never knows. It could be the next mitzvah that you perform that could be the one that breaks the camel's back and brings the Mashiach. So don't stop doing mitzvot. Now, that reason is all very well and good, but the truth is that we've done many mitzvot over thousands of years. And thank God people weren't holding their breath waiting for Mashiach. Maybe we'd be better off looking for another reason to do mitzvot. Anybody have any ideas? Why should I do mitzvot? Before we get there, perhaps if we can answer the last part of the question, for whose benefit do we do mitzvot, we can then come to understand the reason for doing mitzvot in the first place. And perhaps this story might shed a little bit of light on this question. Now, the story is told in Jerusalem. There lived a family, and we'll call them, for the sake of the sermon today, we'll call them the Siegels, okay? Nice Jewish name from Jerusalem. They were a very ordinary, typical family that you might find living anywhere. There was a father, a mother, and there were 8 children. There were 15 other families living in their apartment building in Jerusalem, and they had a very good relationship with their neighbors. Now, some neighbors were the "hi, can I borrow some milk" variety, while the others were just a friendly nod and a smile genre. One day, this family decided that the time had come to invest in central air conditioning for their apartment. So, Mrs. Siegel calls Avi, the air conditioning guy. Okay? And Avi inspected the Siegel's apartment and says to her, "In my opinion, Mrs. Siegel, the best place to install the unit would be off your utility porch next to the bathroom." Wonderful. Okay, utility porch. Doesn't interfere with anybody. It was Sukkot when Rachel Siegel got an unexpected knock on her door. Mrs. Klein, their downstairs neighbor, had a very hard and unpleasant look on her face. Rachel felt this very sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. Had one of the children got into a fight with one of the Klein's kids, perhaps broken windows, damaged property, everything was going through her head. "I'll get straight to the point," says Mrs. Klein. "Your air conditioning has been driving us crazy. I've suffered the entire summer from the awful noise of the motor that it makes." I didn't say a word, but now over Sukkot, it's become unbearable. We can't enjoy a meal in the sukkah without the racket of that machine. You've got to get rid of it. Rachel and her husband, Zavi, were dumbstruck. They'd realized that the unit was positioned outside over the Klein's garden, but it never occurred to them that it might be disturbing them. Now, the Siegels lived on the 2nd floor, 1 floor above the Kleins. They'd always enjoyed very cordial relations with their neighbor, although they were by no means close friends. Rachel was pained by what they had learned, that she had been disturbing her neighbor so disagreeably that it bothered the neighbor the whole summer. And she immediately ran to turn off the air conditioning. She said to Mrs. Klein, "We will find a way to resolve this." And what she did was, even though she was under no legal obligation to do so, she called Avi, the air conditioning guy, and says, "You have to move it. Got to find another way." And basically, he said, "Madam," he said, "I've never had this problem in all the years I've been installing air conditioning units in Jerusalem. It's something that we just learned to accept." So with no choice, she gave the instruction to Avi to move the air conditioning, find another place. What had happened was they found a place to move the unit, which would jut out from the wall, a little bit of an offensive eyesore on their sunny balcony. So 2 hours and 1,500 shekels later, and even though it was ugly, pronounced their teenage daughter, they moved it. Now, the family sat down and they talked about it. And basically, what Rachel said was, it's all a question of how you look at it. I don't look at it, the air conditioning unit, as being an eyesore, even though it is on our balcony now. We moved the air conditioning to actually, not because we were obligated to do so, but because it's the correct way to behave when you're doing something that affects somebody else. In other words, they were doing it as a mitzvah. Good relationships with our neighbors is a central value within our lives. Every time now I see that unit on the porch, it won't upset me. To the contrary, it will show me and remind me that I did a mitzvah. Didn't just kiss the mezuzah on the way in and out the house, but we performed a mitzvah. It's an object of infinite value, since we elevated the air conditioner to the status of a mitzvah. Now, if I was to ask my son, Ben, the lawyer, what would be the number of hypothetical mitzvot that were performed in this, I'm sure Ben would say to me, Dad, he'd give me all the legal reasons why I shouldn't do anything about it and should have left it where it was. But mitzvahs aren't hypothetical. Mitzvot are very real. And so, while you're counting the number of mitzvot that were performed in that story, let me ask you a more straightforward question. And that is, for whose benefit did the seagulls move their air conditioning unit? Was it for the clients? Was it for themselves? Now, clearly they did it so as not to make a fuss with their neighbors. And at the same time, they wanted to perform the mitzvah of loving one's neighbors. So they killed 2 birds with 1 stone, or with 1 mitzvah, should I say. But I want you to focus, if you will, on the last line. Think about what Yankel said. Yankel said they elevated a common household appliance as an air conditioning unit to the status of mitzvah. And I believe that this line tells us the true value and reason for doing a mitzvah. And that is that anything and everything in our lives can be an opportunity to do a mitzvah, particularly if it helps others. And that's why we do it. I remember many years ago when I was studying for my master's degree, we had a professor in the particular class. She was not Jewish. And she challenged the class to come up with one thing in their lives that they do on a daily basis that they could not insert God into. They couldn't make that action holy. So one person put up their hand and they said, well, how about in the morning when I have to have my coffee? I've got to have my coffee before I can even talk to anybody. There's nothing holy about that. And then she went into a litany of reasons why it is very holy. i.e., when you turn on the faucet, you expect the water to come out. Where did that water come from? The coffee bean itself, where did it come from? Who grew it? Who harvested it? Who provided for its ability? And then how did it arrive to your home? And then mixing the water that God created and with all the beans, and she went into this whole litany of things. And really, again, it's up to us. It's up to us to decide, do we go along life's road in a mundane way, or do we look to elevate our lives in the performance of a mitzvah and including God into what we do? Sometimes a mitzvah is there to benefit ourselves. And sometimes we derive a sense of happiness from doing a mitzvah. And that makes us want to do more mitzvot. That's okay too. And sometimes we have reminders in our lives of the mitzvot that we performed, whether an air conditioner or anything else that we've done. It might be a keepsake. It might be something of great value, like a reward for helping someone. We saw an incredible mitzvah just now on the bima. Perhaps some of you didn't even realize it in front of your eyes. Okay, I think you know what I'm talking about, so I'm not going to say it. Beautiful mitzvah right there in front of the whole congregation. Just remember that ultimately we do mitzvot because we can. Because they make us feel better about ourselves and because they help others. And we do so without the expectation of reward, whether from God or from who we help. And hopefully, we have enough mitzvot mementos in our lives that remind us of why we do so and then encourage us to continue to do so. On this holiday of Sukkot, when God gives us an abundant mitzvot, taking the lulav, the etrog, sitting in the sukkah. May God also grant us the ability to continue to do mitzvot for His sake as well as ours, and that may we continue to take satisfaction in seeing how doing so adds so much to our own lives and to the lives of others. Shabbat Shalom.